Welcome back, everyone. Super excited today. We have none other than the dark Dr. Mark Costas. If you don't know, Dr. Mark Costas is an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, international keynote speaker, and is the host of the Dentalpreneur podcast, which boasts listenership in 151 countries with over 10 million total downloads and 2,000 plus episodes. Yours truly may have been on one recently. During his 21-year clinical career, Mark was able to start and acquire 16 dental practices in California and Arizona. Dr. Costas is the founder of the Dental Success Institute, the Dental Success Network, and a rapidly growing DSO, Dental Success Partners. He is also the founder of Front Office Academy and Colorado Surgical Institute. His newest passion project, Smile Outreach International, a nonprofit 501c3 organization, brings much-needed dental care to people who need it most throughout the third world. Welcome to the program, Mark. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Greg, good to see you, buddy. It's the third time I got to see you in a couple short months. We got to see you in Vegas at Dentistry's Got Talent, and then you were nice enough to come on my show, and now returning the favor. And
I
I'm
know
happy.
I've known of you for a while. We've kind of been running in parallel circles, kind of like those two like spinning tops. I don't know how old you are. I think we're about at the same age, but those spinning
Exactly the
tops
same way.
where
Yeah.
you'd spin them and they'd go into this like little hemisphere thing and then they bounce off each other. And so kind of
Yep.
feels like you and I have been running in those circles and respected you for a long time. So glad we finally met for the first time and then we're able to exchange some time together with each other. Well, I want to start from the beginning, which is your podcast, right? So if you have been doing it that long, and I have to tell you a little story. So one of my clients who's up in the Portland area, before he became a client, I was doing a little bit of reconnaissance on him, and come to find out, he was on your podcast like 8 or 10 years ago, like before podcasts were the cool kid club. So you got to tell me about the inspiration behind the start of your podcast.
Yeah, I was hanging out in entrepreneurial circles early in my career. I was having a hard time finding like a quote unquote coach or consultant that I got along with or that shared my philosophies. So I went outside of dentistry and started kind of doing these mastermind groups with just general entrepreneurs. I ended up one of my main mentors was a leader in the fitness space, actually. He had a mastermind for fitness business owners, fitness business creators, and I was into fitness at the time, even though I didn't have a fitness product. I joined his because he had just great marketing advice and great just kind of entrepreneurial advice. But that group of people was extremely successful. They were first movers in the podcast space. And they were like, man, you just gotta you gotta start a podcast. You have a very specific audience. It's dental business owners. You should start one. And I was like, begrudgingly. I got my team together and I said, let's try this thing out. And in the beginning, it was very, very lightly listened to. There's only 4 other dental podcasts at the time, probably close to 200 now. So we did have first mover advantage. People were seeking the information that I was sharing. And that turned from a 2-day-a-week podcast to a 5-day-a-week podcast to a 7-day-a-week podcast, now back down to 5 or 6 days per week, and haven't missed a week or like an episode in over almost 9 years now. So yeah, it's been a great journey.
Wow, that's amazing, and it is a crowded field, I can tell you. And for myself, I have spoken with a number of different people, and it was an interesting journey for me. People have told me, you've got such an interesting story. You should write a book. You should write a book. And I thought, a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago now, I wrote the intro in the first couple of chapters. A friend of mine's an academic. He's a professor at ASU, and
Mhm.
he shared some tips on how to write the book and gave me the insights. And so I started it, and there just wasn't passion around it. And
Yeah.
for me, if I'm not passionate about something, and I share this with clinicians of mine and team members as we coach them and as we're trying to find their lane, if you're not passionate about it, find something else,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
So
you have to have passion behind it in order to make that, make the vision a reality. And so do you find that with those that you work with or those that come seeking, what you do and what you share at the Dental Success Institute?
yeah, it's interesting because first of all, when I think about, you and I speak at live events. And I'm speaking at the NeoDent Symposium next weekend in San Diego, and they expect to have 800 to 1,000 people. And I have my big live event. It takes an entire year to plan. We get between 800 and 1,000 people. And, when I look at my stats, any given day for the podcast, we're getting between 12 and 15,000 unique visitors or listeners from all over the world. So if you take one of our larger speaking engagements, Greg, and you multiply that by 10, that's any given day when I flip on the microphone from, if I want to, I could be wearing my pajamas. But so it really makes a whole lot of sense. And people all over the world have very similar concerns and challenges. So to be able to get an expert on that has a very specific skill set, a very specific kind of area of expertise, it's fun to have them on to help people navigate through those challenges, not just in dental business ownership, but in entrepreneurship and leadership, personal development. We're really big in personal development. I've had like New York Times bestselling authors, et cetera, Olympians, professional athletes. So it's really, really served selfishly for my own personal development. It's given me an excuse to reach out to people that I respect inside and outside of dentistry. It's just been an incredible vehicle for getting the word out about my businesses. So to your point, when I am doing consultations, I don't have a sales team. Like anybody that comes into DSN or DSI, I typically talk to them first. And these are consultation appointments. And typically the people that I'm talking to for a half hour at a time, usually I have 10 to 15 of these a week. I'm actually screening them based on how philosophically aligned we are. So if they've never listened to the podcast, if they've never been to a live event, they're not a member of any of our other programs, never consumed any of our content before, I typically give them some homework first. I say, listen to 3 episodes of the podcast, come to a live event. You're invited to anything that we're doing. Take this course, read my book, do something so that we're philosophically aligned. And if you're still interested in what we have to say, then we can get on another 20-minute call and then we can talk about potentially joining or, hiring me to help you out. So yes, to answer your question, I really, really find that the people that end up in our organization receiving services from us have similar philosophies. And I frankly, I'm just too far along in this game to do business with anybody that's not philosophically aligned.
Well, and I can appreciate that because it really is about mindset. Like, are you ready to move forward? And I can share with you, my journey in dental. It's been 18 years now, and 3 years ago, starting G&A Consult. In the beginning, I believe in vulnerability on my podcast and in general, right? So for myself, in the beginning, when you branch out on your own, it's as disciplined as I'd love to say that I was in the very beginning. It was, oh, I can get a client, great. Now as I evolve, it's more about, okay, so are you ready to take the steps necessary to get better? It's kind of like when doing discovery calls with potential clients and asking them questions. And inevitably, when they say something like, oh, and by the way, can you assess certain team members I have or employees? If they're asking that question, you know full well that they already know which team members aren't aligned with the growth that they're trying to achieve. It's
Exactly.
not even a matter of whether or not, they need an assessment of certain employees. It doesn't mean that they're bad employees necessarily. It could be that it's wrong person, wrong seat, but
Mhm.
they already have a pretty good idea. And so that's part of what I think I'm hearing you say. And it's what we find as well during the discovery process more and more now is that it's more about alignment of I know you do want to grow because in the full arch lane, like you've got to be ready, right?
Mhm.
If you're hitting a ceiling, it's not so much always others. A lot of times it's take that mirror and hold it right up against yourself because there's a lot of self-examination that has to happen for yourself, for your team, and are you willing to get into that change management mindset? Do you
Sure.
find that as well when people come into your network?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what we're testing for during kind of our initial discovery call. I like that you use that. It's a great kind of term because you are trying to discover if you're aligned, right? If you're all looking for the same thing. I mean, if somebody came to me and they're like, "Hey, listen, I want to build this a 30 operatory HMO practice. I want to take Medicaid as well. We're all about volume. I want to figure out how I can hire as many associates that are brand new off, off the assembly line, that are willing to work for $300 a day. I'd be like, well, that's awesome. That is one business plan. I don't know how much I can help you because I'm not aligned with that particular type of dental practice. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it's good or bad. You don't have to label it, right? At least that's what I'm learning, right? I'd like
Mhm.
to say that I have learned, but I'm learning. It doesn't, you don't have to judge or label it. I don't have to, right?
Right.
But there's other ways. If you have a belief system and you have a business mindset that's one way, if there's alignment, I can help you do this. And one of the things that I found early on too with what I'm doing is that initially I thought, am I too niche? If I'm focused on that fixed full arch, all on X, whatever you want to call it, like teeth in a day lane, is it too specific? Do I need to broaden the lane out? And what I learned pretty early on in the process, sharing, my elevator pitch, my statement, with others, and really what I do and what we do at GNA Consult is that it doesn't mean that's the only thing, but that's the core focus. Of
Mhm.
course, if somebody comes in and they don't need all their teeth in an arch ripped out and they're salvageable teeth, there's still other treatment modalities. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But if you are super hyper focused on what you do, then you can be really good at that, right? That's why the best pitcher in baseball isn't necessarily the best home run hitter. Although, we do know that there's one right now that used to play for plays for the Dodgers now, and he's going to make me wrong. Of course, there's always one exception to the rule, but the vast majority of pitchers in baseball. Of course, I literally just like put my foot in my mouth as I was sharing that analogy, and you're laughing, Mark. But you get what I'm saying, right? You have your lane of what you're really good at focusing on, and what I find is that it's almost a huge disservice to try to be all things to all people. And there are some consultants that do that, and I don't want to bag on them. But when you find that lane and you hone in on it, you get really good at and find those like-minded people. Are you finding that attraction with those other like-minded people that work with you on what you're doing at the Dental Success Institute?
Of course, yes. Let's use this analogy instead. Let's just say, the Tom Brady's of the world aren't necessarily the people that are also the best linebackers on the football team. So it always used to drive me crazy when people are like, "Oh, Tom Brady's the best player in football." Like that bothers me because he's the best quarterback in football, but he's not the best safety or defensive back or even running back. He's the best quarterback maybe ever to live in football, but not the best player. I mean, that makes no sense to me. Anyway, I digress. So back to, your specialization. Um, the old tired cliche is it's better to go, an inch wide and a mile deep than a mile wide and an inch deep. And I totally believe that. Like the color beige isn't anybody's favorite color. So if you're trying to, appeal to too broad of an audience, you're not gonna build any true loyal fans because you're trying to please too many people. You're trying to be in too many different places at one time, and you're trying to gain expertise in too many different areas. So yes, I have a very specific type of person that I love to work with. That doesn't mean that there's not a place in a DSN, for instance, which is kind of a community and a network and a buying group and virtual continuing education. Doesn't mean that there's not a place for every dentist in a community like that. But if I'm going to be spending one-on-one time with somebody, we have to kind of have, I keep on using this term, but we do have to have a philosophical kind of um, agreement, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you. And so, well, let me ask you this because Dr. Brisky was on I don't know, maybe a month ago or so onto the program, and I mean, he really shared some pretty amazing things with me and opened up about, saying that everybody really should have a therapist at some point and how breaking away from that business mindset and, for him, I think he called it the 14 hour or the 14, I don't think it was a 14 mile, could have been a 14 mile, but that breakaway time alone to really self-reflect and look inward so that he can show up better for his team was something that I found incredibly, enlightening, right? And to hear that coming from someone who, as a fellow co-founder of the Colorado Surgical Institute, and a group that I respect, and as a former employee at Neodent, watching from that perspective and the growth of the Colorado Surgical Institute. Tell me a little bit about at that institute, because there are so many in the industry that look from the outside in, especially in the merger acquisition space and all of that's going on in the DSO space, that they almost turn their nose down at, those clinics that are doing full arch. And it's like, oh, they're just tough to deal with. And, all of that. Tell me about what you're teaching and coaching and training in your philosophy, and I'll use your word now, your philosophy when it comes to those that are attending the Colorado Surgical Institute, leveling up their skills and adding this full arch treatment modality into their practices that they currently have.
Yeah. Yep. So Dan Brisky, one of my very close friends, co-founder of Colorado Surgical Institute with myself and Dr. Taher Dune. It's worth noting that, both I met both of them through the Dental Success Company. So Dan and Taher both were DSI folks, are currently. Dr. Dune still is a black belt coach inside DSI. So very, very philosophically aligned. Great guys. I couldn't agree more with what Dan has to say as far as therapy and being able to be self-reflective, et cetera. In fact, DSN, with every DSN membership, you get therapy or psychiatric care if you need it. That comes as a part of your membership. We have dropped down to number 3 as far as white coat professionals, as far as the incidence of suicide. We used to own the top spot, but now it's family physicians, veterinarians, and then us. So we're still in the top 5, which is not good, but I think it's very, very important to be able to speak to somebody else. There are a ton of stressors when it comes to the type of profession that we are in. We definitely have a lot going on as far as needing to have micromillimeter precision in clinical care, but also have to be skilled and emotionally intelligent when it comes to dealing with humans, patients, and our teams. We have to be savvy when it comes to business. We have to have, a sharp kind of entrepreneurial mind as well. There's a lot that's expected of people that are dental practice owners. So I think that those stresses can compound very quickly. So it makes perfect sense to me that we are a profession that is way up there as far as suicide, depression, substance abuse, divorce, all of those negative things that come along with super high stress professions. So the more you can talk to somebody, the more you can get around like-minded people that support you and understand some of the challenges that you're going through, the better off you're going to be. Now, as far as the philosophies of the Colorado Surgical Institute, I hear what you're saying. There are people that think that, if you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. So if you want to do full arch, maybe somebody has 3 bombed out teeth, but they have 16 other restorable teeth. They're like, hey, man, how about a full arch, restoration on you, sir? It's like, well, that might not be the best, treatment plan for this particular person, but I'm sure things happen. I'm sure people that are full arch people might look at that and have, some sort of rationale for maybe extracting some good teeth. That's not what we're all about at Colorado Surgical. We do also teach onesies and twosies. We teach implant bridges. We teach wisdom tooth extraction. We have an IV sedation course. So it's just one of our many treatment and training protocols is full arch placement and restoration. But I mean, if there are, these ideal cases where full arch is necessary, I don't think there's a better place to go. We are stateside. Colorado is one of the few states where you can get a temporary license. You can get a 10-day license um, if you hold a license in any other state, so you can actually put hands on patients. You don't have to go overseas. And I think that one of the greatest things about Colorado Surgical is that the patients are cared for in a post-op manner at Dr. Brisky's office or Dr. Dune's private practices. So after the implants are placed, we all know that there's complications, especially in an educational environment. If there's complications for these patients, they're not just sent out into the wind because the course is over. They are the patients of Dr. Brisky and Dr. Dune. So post-op is completely cared for. And we have 100% of the people that receive an implant get a restoration on that implant as well. Some of the things that bother me about some of the overseas courses that guarantee, say, like you get 30 implants no matter what, if you've ever looked at some of the post-op x-rays of some of those courses, there's implants that are going in all different directions. Never even a question that they're restorable or not, because they're not restorable because of the placement. So then you get into this like weird ethical place where I placed 30 implants, but did I do these patients any good? Like, have I helped them in any way? And we are living up to the standards of the United States, and that all patients deserve and are required post-op care till the end of the case. And all of those implants will be restored. So that's why I think we're superior to a lot of the other courses out there.
Well, and what you're talking about is patient care. And ultimately, that's what should be the focus. Yes, education is critically important so that patient care can happen in each of the attendees' practices once they leave there, if they're going to move forward with any treatment modality, so they can care for their patients in their own practice. But the patient care of those patients that are raising their hand and saying yes doesn't matter if they're paying half the fee, no fee, full fee, to be a patient in the chair while clinicians are being educated to be able to give better patient care in the future to others. Those patients should be cared for. And yeah, loud and clear, I hear exactly what you say, because I've seen some things, Mark. I've seen some things, and
Yeah.
it's just not okay. Because I've been around for 18 years and been to courses in a lot of different places. And, ultimately, the onus is on all of us, not just on the clinicians, not just those who are putting on courses, not just on the manufacturers that are, helping to support the courses and providing implants for, not just the bone grafting companies, not just the tool suppliers, right? The instrument company. It's on everyone, right? It's kind of like the TSA, see something, say something. And you can say something by not participating in it moving forward. But, I really appreciate the comprehensive nature and by you bringing that forward, because that's critically important. And speaking of care, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about Smile Outreach International, the nonprofit that you started. I believe you started, that you're a big part of. So I
Yep.
want to open up a little bit space for you to be able to talk about that, because critically important. I'll just share that my daughter-in-law just spent some time down in Guatemala with a group. She works for Phoenix Children's Hospital. She has her doctorate in occupational therapy, and there was a group of 14 that went down, and they raised their hand and said, hey, we could really use some dental supplies. And I reached out to the dental community, and it was just overwhelming how many people raised their hand and says, yes, here, tons of dental supplies came in instantly. But I'd love to hear about your organization and what you're doing to help the greater good.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that, Greg. It truly is the next chapter in kind of my career. I graduated from dental school in 2002, and I started immediately in downtown Phoenix, volunteering at a homeless dental clinic with Dr. Chris Volchek. It's called Brighter Way, and that was kind of my toe dip into um, charitable dentistry, and I was hooked right off the bat. I quickly turned that into a 4 day a month kind of thing. Every Friday, I was going down to the homeless clinic and getting to kind of know the administration side of things and the reality of providing free care and how much dental care is necessary. What people don't get about charitable dentistry and going on mission trips, et cetera, is we talked about this earlier. Dentistry is a very, very high stress, high burnout profession for a lot of the reasons that we already spoke about. But there's no better antidote, I believe, than to go and do it for free with no expectation of anything in return. You're going into an area where you know that people can't afford to pay for dental services. Maybe, they're a middle-aged person that has never been to a dentist before. They might be riddled with decay, periodontal disease, infection, and you go in there and you help them to get more healthy with no other ulterior motive other than just to help them out. One of the cool side effects of that is that burnout goes away because you're reminded of the amazing ability that you have in your own two hands. Um, it was always a dream of mine to create my own nonprofit. There's lots of amazing nonprofits out there that service people all over the world, but it was always my dream to have my own and put my own personal stamp on one. Smile Outreach International was something that I had thought about since early in my career. Finally got to the spot where I had the bandwidth and the contacts to raise some money to make this a real thing. So went about the 2-year process of creating our own 501c3. We got approved in every single one of the 50 states to accept donations, which is a long, laborious process. So that has been done. And 2 years ago, we started going on these mission trips. And I've been so far to Tanzania, the Dominican Republic several times, just got back from Fiji. We have a Nicaragua, Honduras, and Mexico trip scheduled. We're probably going to go back to the South Pacific and Asia next year as well. So my goal here is to go to these places, help the local population, but not just be one and done, not just to go there and chuck some teeth or, to give some oral hygiene instruction, which is really, really valuable, but then you're gone for maybe ever, right? So my vision is to create sustainable clinics. So we have one that we're going to be building in the Dominican Republic, one that we're going to be building in Mexico. We want to contribute to other clinics that aren't yet sustainable, one in Tanzania, maybe one in Fiji, where we go in there and we actually have some sort of outreach program. We have a local dentist that can maintain some level of care for post-op after the mission groups come and go. And we want to integrate some, if it's possible, integrate some of the local dental students into the clinic as well, so they can use it as an area to learn on real patients. So we have the sustainability model that I think is unique, and that's the true goal of what Smile Outreach hopefully will become at some point. So Greg, when you're talking about, like, people ask me this all the time, 16 dental practices, and I have another half dozen businesses that run simultaneously. And I don't know if you've ever gotten this question, but like, hey, Mark, like, when is enough enough? Like, why do you keep on doing this? When you either sell or transition out of a company or a practice, why do you go and start another or two or three? Well, to me, it was always that I have advanced ADD like you have. But more than anything, I had this vision in the back of my head that if I created enough contacts and I saved enough money, I'm going to be able to self-fund this charitable venture that I had in mind. And that I'm finally to the point where I have the time. I have one more child left in the house. He's got 2 years before we're empty nesters. And I'm really just setting myself up for what I want to do for the rest of my career, and that's do free dentistry.
Yeah, I I can totally relate. So the ADHD, you called me out. That's pretty good. I like that. I'll
We've
take
talked
it
about
though.
this
Coming
before.
coming from you, I'll take it. It's totally true. It's totally true. Well, there's a phrase that has been shared with me before, and you can't outgive God, right? So if you've been blessed with a lot and you've worked, work hard for it, right? And I have. There's so many ways to give back, and I have for many years, for 2 decades, being a part of Big Brothers Big Sisters and being on their speakers bureau for a long time. I've been blessed with the gift of gab and being able to present in front of large audiences. And if I can do that in front of a large audience, in front of different groups, in front of different businesses, and talk about what it's like to be a mentor, because the need's so great. And in Metro Phoenix alone, in Central Arizona, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Arizona, the wait list for a big brother is 2 years plus, and at times they just stop taking little brothers because the need's so great. And the time commitment and what it takes to give back and how you can really change somebody's life. And I've had a little brother twice, and the one that I have currently, I've been matched with him since he was 7. He's now 20, so we're officially out of the program. And just to watch his development in life and his mannerisms and some of his snarkiness and his personality just is reflective of me. I mean, just being able to give back like that, I mean, and that's not even like a financial thing, right? That's just giving back. And uh, giving back is so critically important, and it has. And a part of that too is, I've been sober for 19 years, and I just continually give back as much as I can. And so I uplift that from you and what you're talking about, because you are tremendously successful, and there's those that will hoard that or do it and say, I want to go lie on a beach somewhere. And I know if you're anything like me, yeah, that would last about 5 minutes. And then it's like, okay, you remind me of the Billy Idol song, right? With the rebel yell, we cried more, 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 because the mind's just racing constantly. So anyway, it's a perfect way to transition into the regular segment on my program. All of my guests play a little something, Mark, called What the Sleuth is Glowing On? 3 rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
First thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Are you ready to play?
I am. First, let me tell you, I was the chairman of the board for 7 years for Yavapai Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So
No
I
way.
very, very much relate. I've had several little brothers. We had a family match last, and his name was Troy. It really is just life changing. So I feel you, man. That's a great, great cause as well. But
Aiden, go onto any of my socials, especially onto Facebook. You will watch Aiden grow up from the age of 7 until 20 years old now. So you can literally watch the transformation from a kid to a young man that he is today, for sure. Thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, that's amazing. Love it. I did not know that about you. See, I learned something. You're not getting out of the questions, though. Question number 1. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's really hard to narrow it down because we're dentists, right? Perio breath you can smell when they walk in the door. And sometimes you're in the break room on the other side of the building, 2,000 square feet away, behind a closed door, and you can smell it when they're sitting in the waiting room. So yes, I've seen some really, really bad cases of gram-negative bacteria and spirochetes just brewing in somebody's mouth for years and years, and there's a very definitive smell to it. You can put cologne on the inside of your mask, and it like you could gargle with mouthwash and put mints in your nose, but you'll still smell it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Oh, you just reminded me yesterday. So I had an Uber driver, very nice older gentleman. He's putting the suitcase into the back of his vehicle, which I was very grateful for. I get into the back seat of his car, and just the waft of perio breath still in the vehicle. I'm just like, oh.
No worse smell.
So bad. So bad. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I can smell it on a plane, but they're like 10 rows back now. Okay, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
Oh man. So the reason I got into dentistry was when I was 16 years old, I knocked all of my front teeth out. I had a collision with the left field fence. I was starting left fielder and broken jaw and the whole bit. So I do have to say I'd recently gotten my braces off like 6 months before that. So my poor parents spent $5,000 on fixing my smile, and then I knocked out all of my front teeth. Honestly, like, thank God for implants. This is another reason why I'm a huge proponent of implants versus removable or crown and bridge, because I've had the ability to control exactly the aesthetics of my smile. So my smile is better now than it ever could have been with my natural teeth, to tell you the truth. But the only thing is, I drink a lot of red wine and coffee, so I think that just some whitening would help a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. My son has congenitally missing laterals, and he had somebody who, before I got into dentistry, he's 33 now, just didn't understand, really get it, and I wasn't as active during that part, and put on a 6-unit bridge, just ground down the central incisors, and put on a 6-unit bridge that was so bad because it had a high smile line. It was a bad situation, and the Pontic was so bad you could see the metal underneath. Yeah, it was really bad. Thank you, Tim Kaczynski, Dr. Tim Kaczynski, for fixing that when he was 17 years old. So Tim Kaczynski is a good friend of mine in Michigan. That's where I'm from originally. All right, question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
Wow, that's a really good one. I think that gosh, that's really, really hard. I think that within my generation, amazing things have happened with technology advancement. I think that it was revolutionary that we brought CT into dentistry, and that the vast majority of surgical docs are using a CT. It's amazing what we can see with a CT. We can see the depth of decay. We can see periapical lesions. We can plan advanced implant cases. So I would have to go with the CT machine, just because of kind of what it is that I do at Colorado Surgical, and the miracle that I've seen with diagnostics and planning with a CT.
I mean, it's removed a lot of the pucker factor, I would imagine, for a lot of clinicians who were doing dentistry, and especially, anything that was intraosseous before that. I mean, I can't even imagine. So
Yeah.
awesome. All right. Well, in the last few minutes, I want to respect the time of my listening audience and yours as well. Is there anything I haven't asked you or anything that you're dying to share with my listening audience today, Mark?
No, man, I would like to say for the younger listeners, I have my audience skews really young. As you guys know, the stakes have never been higher for your ability to navigate practice ownership and negotiate a good associate contract. So all I would say is, the average dental student graduates with $292,000 in student loan debt. So the stakes are really high. Don't take it lightly just because you understand the Krebs cycle and you can memorize all the neural pathways and you've never gotten a B in your life does not mean you're going to be able to figure business out. So make sure, because the stakes are so high, that you find a podcast or free or paid resources, a group that can support you. Don't go into practice ownership thinking that you can figure it out on your own. That could be the most expensive, timely, frustrating, emotionally devastating decision that you ever make, and that's trying to do it by yourself. That's all I would have to say to the younger audience.
I think those are tremendously wise words because the people management side of it, in addition to the business management side of it, are equally as important as the clinical management side of owning your own business and of dentistry in general. So thank you for lifting that up and bringing that forward. My guest today has been Dr. Mark Costas. Mark, how do they find you? Like they can't find you. What's the easiest way for them to find you, especially all of the good things that you're doing with the Dental Success Institute, the Dental Success Network? They can look up the Dentalpreneur podcast, of course, which I would strongly recommend. It's fantastic content.
Well, thanks, Greg. Yeah, really, really appreciate your time today. Dr. Mark Costas on Instagram and TikTok. You can find us at truedentalsuccess.com. That's my main website. The most predictable way, if you want to reach out to me directly, is just to DM me on Instagram. That's where I am most times.
Fantastic. Again, my guest today on the Two Sleuth podcast has been Dr. Mark Costas. Thank you, my friend, for your time and energy today. It's been wonderful.